You're listening to MSP Survivalist, real talk from the data security experts. Today, we're going to be discussing an MSP niche, specifically dental MSPs. Make sure to hit that subscribe button to catch future episodes. We have with us today a special guest, Bill Dungey from CTS, an MSP based out of Ontario, Canada. Bill is the owner and operations manager over at CTS. Bill, we have you there today?
Yes, sir. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for taking time out of your day to talk about this. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And we have with us today the usual suspects. Adam, are you there?
Yep, you bet. Loud and clear.
Great. Adam Stufflick is the cloud business manager over at NovaBACKUP. And Nate Forage. Nate, we have you online as well?
Yep, I'm here.
Great. Nate is the VP of Strategic Solutions over at NovaBACKUP. So, Bill, maybe you could tell us a little bit about CTS, customers you work with, a little background. Is that possible?
Yeah, sure. We started over a decade ago out of my dad's basement. He was an electrician way back in the day and a very early adopter of all things higher tech, if you will. I remember when he made a big deal out of a 10 megabyte hard drive and having very early access to the internet. And a consequence of my own exposure to the internet and technology that early was that I became very proficient with tech. He went on to start programming things like PLC machines in factories and stuff to Visual Basic, and after that he started to look more toward the hardware and networking side of tech. And so because he was doing that, as a result I was doing that, and so all the way through my school I was the kid who fixed the classroom computers, and if somebody had a problem I would go fix the computer. I'm still that guy. If I have to go to a sort of conference or anything where there's multiple people watching something off a laptop, I'm automatically like looking at the laptop. What kind of projector do we have here? What's on the table that I'm inevitably going to have to fix? We started, I say we, really it was Cliff, my dad, who started with just a couple little companies. And his first foray into backups, when I say that he was an early adopter, he was also wise enough to recognize that backups were like capital C crucial. And so for the first couple clients he had, even though he was going in and maybe fixing minor technical problems, providing systems here and there, it was backups that he focused on. So much so that our company started under the name Backup Server. So we were called Backup Server, and he had a little server running in his garage where people would back up all their stuff to him remotely, and that was basically like his key point that he was trying to drive home. Later on, we would go to the Ontario Dental Association's yearly conference, or trade show rather, and we had a booth set up under this name Backup Server. And people kept on walking past and basically saying, oh, I'm good, I have backups. And we're like, no, that's like 10% of what we do.
Was there a reason that market drew you guys into attending those shows initially back in the day?
Initially, it was happenstance. We had a nonprofit organization that Cliff was working for, doing some IT. And this is pretty much on the side of like his regular 9 to 5. And one of the people that worked there, his wife worked at a dental office, and I guess they got to talking and they asked if Cliff would come in, and that was basically his introduction into dental. This was right around the time when I came on too, because I remember that office. And the world of dental, very generally speaking, is really tight. So as soon as we had built a name for ourselves as somebody that could be trusted, there's maybe a backhanded way of describing some IT providers that I have is calling somebody like a Kijiji IT guy. And so like people who don't have a good solid ground in networking and security, they don't have standards. They're the guys that like when you walk into an office and there's wires draping all over the place. Cliff was adamant to build a business that was paying very strict attention to detail and craftsmanship, if you can call it that. Like that IT was a craft that you could work on. So that spread like wildfire throughout the local dental scene, and we ended up getting picked up by a whole bunch of different people really rapidly.
It seems like dentists being the tight-knit group, that the word of mouth on a good IT service provider seems to travel pretty well.
Yeah, so much so that many of our clients actually graduated from dental school together in the same class. So especially when you're talking about the same age cohort in the same geographical location, they all definitely know each other.
Does dental make up a majority of the clients that you guys are working with today, or you have a few different industries that you are working with?
We have two main verticals that we work with. We work with dental, but that also spans to things like ortho and perio. Don't ask me what they mean. I'm an IT guy. I don't fix teeth. And I guess the other side of the split would be nonprofit organizations. We've grabbed on and linked into those just as much as dental these days. But dental certainly is what built us to be what we are today.
Understood. And our other attendees on the podcast today, Nate and Adam, through working with NovaBACKUP and their backup services as well.
No would be an understatement. Those two gentlemen have saved our rear ends on two occasions. Once, I was even like, I need to send them something. What can I send? Yeah, it's been a long and happy business relationship with those two.
Good to hear. And so what, in your opinion, do you think makes small dental practices, different than the average small, medium-sized business?
I have many different variations of the way I want to say this. So this is what I've got together. I think there's a very specific personality type that lends well to dentistry that I don't really see, or maybe that I'm not exposed to as often in other facets of business. That's where dentists have a lot of concerns that I don't think many other providers or business people really get faced with. For example, if you're a dentist and you have, let's say, one practice or even a handful of practices, everything top to bottom becomes their responsibility. And beside that, they also have a staff that, for the most part, are required, let's say, to back up those decisions. Because a dentist would have, let's say, an old X-ray system is no longer compatible, let's say with Windows 11. It's coming, right? This is the conversation that's going to be filling my inbox in the next couple months. You've got a dentist that wants to upgrade their systems, but they don't have access to old operating systems. And to update to the new operating system, they have to spend $40,000 on this new X-ray system that's unproven, untested, and none of their friends can talk about. And all of that comes back to the dentist. Whereas other markets might have people that they can bounce off of internally to help make those decisions, a lot of that stuff comes back to me, and then we'd have to go call the vendor and say, one challenge we've encountered over and over again is vendors will sometimes send out software packages for practice management or imaging that are not in a full candidate release, but they'll just send it out as an update, and next thing you know, we're installing some beta test. And so then we have to try to translate all of this to the dentist so that they can make the decision, because I can't make the decision for you. It's your systems. Dentists, they have a hard crack about it, and so it's not exactly like a leniency to make more decisions. It's a responsibility. I suppose it's a gift and a curse at the end of the day.
And I imagine the changes we've seen industry-wide in the last 2 to 3 years, I think it's thrown a little bit of turmoil, certainly for some, but I'm not sure how that's affected the dental market. Have you seen, due to the pandemic or other reasons, any changes in the way that these customers are operating, or your business has been affected?
The two big things that I can think of is that dental vendors, again, people who are producing hardware and software for dental offices, in my humble opinion, are not keeping up with recent changes, or those changes are out of reach. I guess it's all just money, right? It depends on how much you want to invest in your business to get that new tech. But I think the bigger thing at hand is, and you'll probably hear me reiterate this several times during this conversation, it's security. And security is my wheelhouse. Where I got my stripes as an IT guy was I got the opportunity to speak at DEF CON about an actual breach that we lived through. One of our clients was exposed to a in-house malicious agent, and we managed to track him down and the whole works. But it seems like no matter which way I put it, this probably has more to do with me than it does the actual industry. But I do read about this on the MSP subreddit and like the sysadmin subreddit. It seems like no matter which way I try to even just describe security as something that can make or break a business, we still have clients who just, I was going to say that they don't care, but if they did care, they would do something about it. Unfortunately, I think the majority of the time, it requires a catastrophic incident for changes to take place. But even then, take this for example, we just had a dental office that opted not to use a server, okay? Like a server in the proper form of the word, like with RAID and redundancy and backups and these kinds of things.
Oh boy.
They had the whole office running off of a desktop. And the desktop had a Western Digital blue hard drive in it. And what do you know? It failed. And it failed to the tune of, I couldn't even mount it in Linux. It was dead, like dead. So I said, well, you have backups, certainly. Yep, I have backups. I set them up myself. You'll find this described on the MSP subreddit with people who work with dental. Either there's clients who trust you the same way you trust your mechanic, right? I don't fix cars. Or there's clients that opt to do 75% of the work themselves, and then they defer the unknown unknowns to you. So he set up his own backups using Backblaze. And setup means he went next, I agree, on the installer, and it did not back up anything that his business depended on. Man. We had to send that hard drive to a lab, and then the great frustration was, I can't believe it's taking this long. It was like 8 weeks. The guy got back probably 80% of what he had. And even then, the response was, put together a stack for me the way that you would put together a stack for yourself. And so I'm starting to build all of these comprehensive tools, one on top of the other, to take care of things front to back. And then the quote comes out and it goes, whoa. But you'll be happy to know he's backing up with us now, so he's at least backing up.
God, I was hoping so. I was like, man, I really hope the end of this story is like he definitely jumped fully on board with you.
Yeah, he's backing up now.
I don't know all the laws and that type of thing about in Canada, but even what he was doing, if he was backing up the data correctly to Backblaze, which I believe, I could be wrong here, don't they just have a U.S. data center in North America? I don't know if they have a Canadian one yet. Isn't that against your laws up there anyway?
Here's the answer to that question. If you take credit card payments, you're supposed to have PCI compliance. And every 4 months or so, I get a ticket in our ticket system because PCI has audited the business and said, hey, like you guys are absolutely wide open. You have to make all these changes. And then I go, cool. This is hourly because this is a massively gigantic job. And everybody goes, okay, cool. Don't worry about it. We'll just say we did. I feel like that approach is taken for everything from data security to offsite backups. For the most part, people are just in this don't ask, don't tell loop. And as long as there's no massive data emergency, everybody just keeps going with what they've got.
Yeah, which is scary.
It's petrifying. I have to make the call.
Yeah, it's a fine line of law versus morals too. Do I tell my customer?
You're saying about changes on our side? I mean, the only thing I can say to that point is just security. Wow.
Definitely in the news, we're seeing more targeted attacks towards MSPs, towards dental MSPs, trying to get to the end users to spread ransomware and so forth. Seeing a little bit more of that kind of stuff in the news lately. So.
Oh, sure. And I won't name the RMM that was responsible, but there was a massive breach, I want to say 6 or 7 months ago. And we're a customer of Huntress as well. Mm-hmm. And man, like security side, I can't say enough about Huntress. They were the spearhead in the forensic analysis of that breach and helping that RMM's customer base get back on their feet. You think about it from, if I was the bad guy, why would I care about Dr. Dungey's office when I can go hit an MSP and get 60 offices?
And speaking of your offices too, I know everybody has a different budget. Where Nate and I came from, it's 7,500 people in the town. There's big cities. But when it comes to physical versus virtual, what's your opinion on like how should a dental office be set up in that realm? What would you prefer and stuff like that?
I will say that if you ask 5 guys, you'll get 5 different answers. So I'm card carrying EFF, right? So I believe in owning my own data. And for that reason, I like the idea of an on-prem server. You could throw this out on any forum or any group or whatever, and I just get chewed to pieces. But I also believe an on-prem server goes well toward data availability as well, because we don't care if the internet cuts out. We've got everything we need in-house. That said, I have no problem farming out services to cloud providers, because it gets to the point where some of that data would be too cumbersome to have. Let's say this make-believe dental office has 5 computers in it. Now we're going to run Exchange in the back room. So some of it can be farmed out to the internet, but certainly for the meat and potatoes of the operations of the business, patient charts and patient images, I like to have that on-prem. Further than that, no dentist ever pays for good internet. So they're all going to go to the cloud and then be like, oh, this sucks, but they didn't pay for the bandwidth.
Sure. So I heard you mention these guys going through college together, right? Marketing strategies and how to get new customers, retain customers, all this stuff is always asked on these subreddits and even the one that we spun up as well. Do you guys ever have a strategy, like besides just emailers or landing pages or anything like that? Do you guys go out to these colleges and try to snag them when they're in the young or anything like that? I'm just curious.
I'm sure other MSPs have done that, and I've worked with other tech companies that are exceptionally hungry. And more often than not, the companies I've worked with that have that rapid or exponential growth, the support suffers. It always suffers. And so the vast majority of business we've had has been handed to us from word of mouth. Take, for example, we had a new install this week with, it was like a server and 2 desktops, this tiny little office. And I went in, did the inventory, did the quote, I basically had a little bit of hands-on with the systems, but enough to basically get an idea or a picture of what we're looking at here. And it turned out that way under the surface, there's years of stuff going on here with different email providers, and we use this program for that wasn't ever explained to me during the quoting process. And the way I look at it is, as long as all the problems get solved and everybody eats, like what I mean by that is all of our guys get paid, I'm happy with that. And I realize that's maybe counter to the Gary V mentality of grow and like action, but so far it's served us well. I take a look at, I think, man, we got to be up around 15 years anyway. Got to be around that. That's my metric or my measure of how things are going, is the long game.
That's a long time, honestly. I think many strive to get to that point, which is, I think a lot of people take a lot of stuff from this podcast. So yeah, no, I think that obviously we're in the backup realm, but there's so many other aspects that obviously you guys are doing right.
Hey, Bill, how do you feel about managed service agreements or contracts when you start up with a new customer?
Generally speaking, our contracts come as a result of continued hourly support. So generally speaking, when we go into places now, there's certain things I need to see that we can agree upon before we even go any further. A big red flag or trigger for me is inside the first 5 or 10 minutes, if I'm hearing from somebody in a leadership or ownership position that I used to work in IT, it's probably not going to work out. Because the shop talk side of it is, you called me. Like, there's a reason I'm here, right? The reason I'm here is because your stuff is broken. And if I walk in and your network room looks like a spaghetti factory, and I hear different stories from different people about what's working and when it's working, and sometimes this does this and sometimes that does that, and then I come to you and say, here, this is what we're going to do. These are the devices that we trust. I know you've never heard of Ubiquity, but it's a better router than you can buy at Best Buy. I know that you're used to having an all-in-one networking appliance that does everything top to bottom, and it costs more to put an access point at the front of the office and an access point at the back of the office, and to manage it on the server, and you can't change the password whenever you want to change it, but we're really good at what we do.
You make a good point there about having to have, I don't know if like minds is the word, but
it's a partnership.
A screening process for both of you, I would imagine.
It has to be.
Make sure to catch part 2 of this episode next week, where we talk more about the client screening process, red flags, cyber insurance, and more. See you then.